knowledge is far more important than money, because with the knowledge you can get money. I'd rather you give me the knowledge you get money than just give me money. Right. And that's what Sarnetta do. He provides a platform for people to get money. And that's what people don't understand about Sarnetta, right? He has created this global network, right, that goes around the world that allows us, think about this, right, to intellectually correspond with each other instead of that nigga shit. We use different vocabulary. If you want to cuss, you can cuss. Some people don't cuss. I did a whole lecture yesterday and didn't cuss one bit, right? They didn't understand a good thing, you know what I'm saying, when it's right in front of their face. So instead of knocking the platform, right, you should try to develop another platform with the brother based off the things that you like to see. See, it's very, very easy to talk shit, right? It's very, very easy to say, well, he ain't doing this and he ain't doing that. Anybody can say that. So then why don't you do what you say he's not doing? And see, that's the problem I have with that. Niggas can throw shots all day long about the platform, but at the end of the day, this platform is needed. The platforms ain't all about debates. The debate is just the fun part of it. Right. The debate is time to let your hair down, let your sweat off. Right. Because you want to beat some niggas up. Spooked out. It's an economic platform developed to draw in business for the African marketplace. So who amongst us routinely make an African marketplace?
I would like for you to join me as I welcome my dear friend Baba Haru Ankh Ra Semahj Se Patha. He is the chief priest of the shrine of Patha. Join me as I welcome him to African Scholar. Baba.
Hetapu.
Hetapu. You know. Thank you so much. You saw that. I remember when I first met you, which was many, many years ago. I'm not going to even go into how many years ago in this broadcast.
Right.
But I do remember that when I came to the studio, you were on the Bowery when I first came to the studio. And I must have stayed down in your studio 4 or 5 hours, if you recall, talking to you. And I used to just come back and just avail myself of your knowledge, so much so that at the end of it, at one point, you said, well, you know what you are, you're a Kemetic Muslim, you know.
Right.
And then you dubbed me and my brother Hannibal Kemetic Muslims.
Right.
You said, you're the only Kemetic Muslims that I know in New York. You know,
that's true.
At that point. So I want to ask you a question. What led you to the Kemetic understanding, to the Kemetic theology, to the Kemetic culture? Because none of us were born into it. True. What led you to it? We all were led to it by some circumstance. What led you?
Well, I may be the exception to the rule. I was born into it in this wise. My father, he was a Christian minister. And he told me later on as I grew up that I was born specifically for the mission of introducing our people to the Nile Valley culture. And he was a follower of Marcus Garvey. And he said that as I grew up and I matured, we have these conversations, and he would say that his reading of the Bible indicates that African people are children of Ham. But he said that the original name in the Hebrew was Kom, and that the original name for the place now called Egypt was Kemet. So therefore, and which means the Kem in the ancient language means burnt, blackened, or hot. So that King James did not add the K when he called us children of Ham. And he said my work was to study the Nile Valley culture, and as I grow up to teach our people about that culture, because he said that was the culture from which Judaism came, from which Christianity came, and from which Islam came, because all the major prophets went into the Nile Valley in Africa to get what they got in terms of knowledge. Moses was taught in the temples of Anu for 40 years. Abraham and Sarah, when they came before Moses, they grew rich in cattle and land because of the hospitality of the Africans of the Nile. Yeshua, now known as Jesus, his life was spared by the hospitality of these same Nile Valley Africans, and also that the Prophet Muhammad's at least 40 of his disciples was spared from the wrath of his tribesmen, the Quraysh of Mecca, when he sent them to the Negusti, the king of kings of Ethiopia, to be spared their wrath and to give them refuge. So it seems that Africa, the Nile Valley Africans, gave refuge to all of these major prophets. So the question is, what kind of people were these? What did they know? What did they believe in? What was their concept of deity before the coming of the Kemetic shepherds into their land? And he said that we should study the cosmology of the farmers and gardeners of the Nile Valley, because basically what we had was just the cosmology of those who came to fight them, really, and who took over their land afterward. So I busied myself with that knowledge, and it was around my father, he passed in 1967, and around 1970 somebody brought me a tape of Dr. Joseph Benjo-Cannon and said, listen to this. And what I heard coming out of that tape was some of the same things my father used to tell me. And I adopted Dr. Ben as my spiritual father. He did not know it, of course. And anything that he read, that he wrote, I read. And from there, of course, I read the works of Sheikh Anta Diop. And even before that, I read Gerald Massey's works, Ancient Egypt, Light of the World, Book of Beginnings, Natural Genesis, the works of Count Volney, and, of course, The Stolen Legacy by George G.M. James, and later on, of course, the works of Sheikh Anta Diop, where he informed us that the oneness of Egyptian and black culture could not be stated more clearly, and because of this essential identity of genius, culture, and race, today all Negroes can trace their culture to ancient Egypt and build a modern society on that foundation. Now, when I read that, I just was excited because I had been talking about Egypt all the time, and people thought I was crazy. He said, you're an African, why do you want to deal with Egypt? That's in the Middle East. I said, the Middle East? The middle of what? I said, look on your map, it's right there. People wanted to be off the African continent because of the greatness of the civilization. People want to steal it for themselves. And of course, we're very generous. I mean, after a while, we allowed the Greeks to come in. But of course, as you know, we were invaded, I think, in 663 by the Persians, Kambutse, and who they call Cambyses. Then in 525 by the Persians, now known as Iran. In, I think, 332 by the Greeks, and then in 332 BC by the Romans. Alexander. And then who became great because he stole the gold of Kemet, by the way. And of course, then later on, the Arabs came, and they are still there, colonizers of that ancient African land, and ancient African culture.
Speaking about invasions by foreigners, let me ask you a question. It's a question that I have asked everyone who studies Kemet, and I've gotten all kinds of answers. So I want to ask you the same questions. Who were the Hyksos?
The Hyksos, that's a mystery that people try to keep a mystery. But of course, the Hyksos, to make it generalized, were nomadic sheep herders of Asia Minor. And they came in there, and they invaded the land, and around the 13th dynastic period, and they were in there for about 200 years, and then they were driven out by Amos the First and Amos Nefertari, the first rulers of the 18th dynastic period. So they were the enemies of the ancient Nile Valley farmers and gardeners, specifically because it had really nothing to do with skin color, as some people like to think. It had to do with lifestyle. When you go to Kemet today, you see the Arab guides will show you, will look at the pharaohs' chariots riding over the necks of the Asiatics and the necks of the Nubians. They don't call them Nubians, the necks of the Negroes. And really, it had to do with the fact that the Asiatic sheep herders were nomads. A lot of the Nubian were likewise nomads, and their lifestyle interfered with the lifestyle of the farmers and gardeners of the Nile. If you come with your flocks and you turn them loose in my garden, you are actually interfering with my lifestyle. You're threatening my life because you're eating my food. And that's what the quarrel was really all about. Because the shepherds, they kept wandering from place to place. They were not building anything. And so they coveted the settled lifestyle of the Nile Valley farmers. And even though we shared with them, you know, when you give without no return, you are violating the laws of Ma'at, which is balance, order, reciprocity. And that's part of what happened.
Well, speaking about color, that's the thing that I'm really concerned about. I know who they were in terms of historically, but what color were they? Now, let me, before you answer, let me just give you a little help, give you a compliment here. You know, I've heard that they were black Asiatics.
Right.
I've heard that they were a mixture between the Kemetic and the Asians. You know, I have heard that they were a mixture between the Kemetic and the Phoenicians. These are some of the explanations that I have been given about the racial identity of the Hyksos. Do you have any further comment on that, or do you agree with any or none of what's been said?
Well, the Greeks called them Hyksos, but they were known as Hek-Shasu, or the rulers of the marshlands. And they were different complexions, as indeed the Africans of the Nile were. If you go to the Metropolitan Museum, you will see some of the original art on the walls. They show people of different complexions, from, like we have in Harlem today, the darkest dark to the highest yellow, as we say. And so these people were of similar complexions. However, some of the temple walls drawings show that they were decidedly of a more of a pink complexion than were the Africans of the Nile Valley. And that had to do with the regions from which they came, the desert regions and nomadic regions from which they descended, you know. Now,
the other thing, in speaking with Dr. Ben, I think it was Monday, we were talking, and I told him that you're going to be the guest on the show, and we just talked. And one of the things that he said was that the rebellion that we had among ourselves, which could be classified as the Common People Revolution, the first quote-unquote proletariat revolution in the 6th dynasty, that revolution in the 6th dynasty set the stage for the invasion of the Hyksos. Do you agree or disagree with Dr. Ben's statement?
Well, there's no doubt that our internal conflicts made it easy for people who are fashioned and trained and conceived to take advantage of divisions, to exploit these divisions. It happened right here with the Native Americans, that they were fighting among themselves. As long as we stayed united, we could thwart any attempts of outsiders to invade, because the spiritual force and power was so intact that they couldn't even come near the border. But when we began to go against the laws of Ma'at, when we began to quarrel over cosmology and politics, then of course we have the people coming and taking advantage of these divisions. So that is true. I think Dr. Ben is right. And for the same thing, we have to take responsibility also, partially, for what happened during the chattel enslavement trade, that it was our battles among each other that made it possible for these foreigners to come in and exploit the differences, our differences, giving those who they saw as stronger guns and not giving those who they saw as weaker guns, so that the stronger ones invaded the villages of the weaker and sold us to Arabs and to Europeans who came later. By the way, of course, you know, the Arabs were involved in the slave trade for more than 1,000 years before the Europeans came.
That's true, yeah.
And are still doing it to this day.
And again, in talking with Dr. Ben would tell you that he doesn't believe in God, and he would tell you that he has no God, but he very much believes in Amun-Ra. Do you have a particular deity coming from a particular period of time in ancient Kemet that you favor?
No, I favor them all.
Okay.
Actually, what we refer to, unfortunately, as gods and goddesses are facets and attributes of Nkara. Nkara, or some say Netcher, is the undifferentiated divinity that governs all creation. If you, as a jeweler, I look at a gem, I look at a diamond, and I see that the diamond has many facets, each throwing off, depending on how the light hits it, a different light. Okay? And Ntara, divinity, undifferentiated, has many aspects and many expressions. Our ancestors used animals, they used birds, they used reptiles to describe aspects of these, of divinity. If you go into the Christian Bible, it'll say, "Be ye wise as serpents and harmless as doves." It also say, "Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider his ways and be wise." So the Bible is saying that ants, doves, and serpents can teach you wisdom, can teach you, if you observe them, they have aspects of human behavior. So our ancestors felt the same way about the lion, about the cynocephalous baboon. They felt the same way about the ibis and the jackal and all of those animals. Now, the Egyptologists, when they come, they willfully choose to misunderstand our way of life and accuse us of animal worship. Well, I think we would be better off worshiping some of those animals than worshiping these two-legged animals who are so racist, which unfortunately we copy and have become clones of in this society. So we have to get rid of this notion of gods and goddesses, first of all, because that's a willful misunderstanding on the part of the Egyptologists, okay, who want to accuse African people of polytheism so they can justify and brag that they have a greater idea in monotheism. Why, the monotheists have murdered, enslaved, raped, and still continue to bash African people to this day. They will kill you because they say you believe in many gods and they believe in one. Well, the devil is a killer and a murderer, from what I'm told. So it would seem as if the people who will come and kill you to force you to believe in their concepts are really devils walking around on 2 feet.
You know, I introduce you, I'm going to change tracks, and I hate to do it, but for this segment, there's some information that I must get in about you personally so that our viewers can understand who you are. I mentioned when I introduced you that I had come down to your jewelry studio, and I also mentioned that I didn't buy any jewelry. I bumped your mind. You know, you are adorned with many of the jewelry that you make in your studio, and I would like to begin perhaps with the symbol that's on your hat. And so if you can just explain the jewelry that my viewers are looking at, from the scarab kepra and to the ankh, would you please do that for us? Yeah.
I'll be happy to. My design of what I call joy, Ellery, because it gives me joy to bring our ancestral emblems of culture to the fore, is actually the outgrowth of the reclamation of the ancient culture of the Nile Valley Africans. Being people from the Africans in the West, we have the choice of claiming any part or any aspect of African culture that we wish. I chose the Nile Valley because it's the oldest, most successful, and longest lasting. And of course, it is the one from which even the Yoruba claim they came, the Akan, the Dogon, the Wolof, they all claim they came from the Nile Valley regions. So I create these emblems of culture because they're actually meditations on inner beauty, meditations for the soul. Like when I wear this, when I put this on in the morning, this is the emblem of Heru, which the Greeks call Horus. We use the bird, the falcon, to symbolize the ascension in spirit. Just like in the Christian faith, they use the dove. They say Jesus ascended as a dove to his Father in heaven. The Hu, or Nebhu, which they call the Sphinx, likewise. This is an emblem of the permanence and the lion spirit of African people.
I wonder if my cameraman can come in and get that clear. I don't know. While you're going to talk, we try to figure it out.
You asked me about the emblem of my hat. Well, that's a lotus petal. And while many people assign the lotus to the Indians, because they have a lotus sutra, let's say, of meditation, the first and oldest lotus master was known as Asar, whom the Greeks call Osiris. And you will see on the papyrus of the Book of the Coming Forth, which they willfully mislabeled the Egyptian Book of the Dead, you will see that a lotus is growing out of the feet of Asar, and on that lotus are the 4 genii, or the 4 guardians of the body temple, known as the Mesu Heru, the children of Heru,
yes,
which guard the lungs, the liver, the small intestine, the large intestine, and stomach. And those organs were placed in separate jars and preserved in the resting place of our ancestors. So these emblems, the bracelet I wear, these are the eyes of Heru. You see,
yes,
the eyes of Heru, which symbolizes balanced vision, attention, attentiveness, and also the awareness. All right. So each time when I put these on, here I have this lotus ring. I was born into the sign of the lion, so I have the lion made of 4 different metals: the yellow, gold, white gold, bronze, and silver. And here, of course, I have the meditation on Heru again. The scarab. The ancestors would put, when you died, they would put a scarab over the heart, symbolizing that this person will come into being again, or the spirit of the person would resurrect. As a matter of fact, the early Christians of Alexandria in Kemet, now miscalled Egypt, they referred to Yeshua, Jesus, as the good scarab. All right? So it was not a worship of a beetle. It was the beetle represents the constant coming into being, something like the metamorphosis of the butterfly. From a slug it becomes a butterfly and grows wings. So it shows the symbol of transformation. All right? Because the beetle, known as the dung beetle, it rolls its eggs up in a ball of dung, and the larva eats and nourishes itself from the nourishment of the dung, and come into the world and goes and gathers dung and does the same thing ad infinitum. So it became the symbol of coming into being, which our ancestors call Keper or Kepera.
And you have forgot the Ankh. Now, don't forget the Ankh.
Oh, of course. They're calling me the Ankh man.
Yes.
And this divine sign, this is the preeminent sign of the African spiritual high culture, because it honors, first of all, the mother, the womb. It honors the father, and the synthesis, the children that comes from the womb through the seed of the father. It also symbolizes the water that rises up from the earth, up to the clouds, falling back on the earth as rain to bring vegetation out of the ground. It also is spirit, mind, and matter. So however you look at Ankh, it shows the continuous regeneration of the life force. Now, when the Romans adopted Christianity in order to co-opt it, they removed the sacred womb as the symbol, because the earliest Christians in Alexandria used the Ankh as their sign of early Christianity. They just adopted it from the early Africans of the Nile Valley. And of course, they themselves were African, people like St. Augustine and whatnot. They all were living in Alexandria region. So the Emperor Theodosius, I think in the 6th century BC, AD, he had an edict that closed the temple of Ast or Set on the island of Philae and banned the Ankh as the preeminent symbol of the early Christians. And then when Constantine came, he substituted the Roman sword, which is now the cross, as the symbol of that religion. So it's time that when we see how the patriarchal hierarchies of all the major religions are dealing in wars and death, it's time we restore the life principle, respect for life. When people, I ride in cabs and they ask me, what's your religion? I say, take a deep breath with me. You've just joined my religion. What kind of religion is that? I said, it's the aim of all religions, life.
Yes.
There's nothing bigger, better than life. Even cockroaches want to live. You try to get them, and they're
the
running.
fastest thing running, aren't they?
Why? They're running for their lives.
Yeah, yeah.
So life must be the most important thing. So now all I have to do is respect your life, you respect my life, and that's the end of war. But if we argue now over, well, I'm a Muslim and you're a Christian, we're going to argue over what? Dogma. I call it dogmas, the guts of dogs.
Yes.
Because all it does is create division, divisiveness. Sunday morning, Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday are the three most divided days in all of the religions, because they all have their various denominations, each one proclaiming themselves to be the right one. Now, if they just would exalt life and honor each other's lives, then they can sit down and discuss things in a civilized way. Since civilization should be about the preservation of life, devil worship involves disrespect of life, because it seems as if what they tell me about the devil is supposed to make your life miserable. And that's what wars do, make people's lives miserable. So all of those hierarchies, and I want to say here that this is not an indictment on members of religions. People are truly sincere in their belief that their faith in deity is going to save them from disasters, from all different types of maladies and disease. And as your faith is, so it will be for you. But you don't have to let anyone force you to believe in anything, because in African culture and spiritual culture, you must know. Knowledge is greater than belief. When knowledge comes, belief has to sit down. If I hold a gun to your head, my brother, and I told you to believe that red is black, you will believe that red is black, and you will proclaim it with the loudest voice, you see. But you cannot know that red is black. Knowledge, your eyes will tell you that is not so. So we are living in the age of I know, which is the Aquarian age, which is on the horizon now. I think 2012, we actually come fully into Aquarius.
And let us continue where we were the last conversation. Our last conversation, we were talking about Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And so we were talking so much about religion, good and evil. And one of the things I wanted to say is that after Nama united Semahj, he brought in Amin-Ra, and then Amin-Ra was overthrown at the end of the first dynasty, and then Set was brought in. And many, many people have thought that Set represents evil. I have not agreed with that. I would like to hear what you have to say about Set, his worship, and his contribution to ourselves, and the contribution to the divine legacy of Semahj Kemet.
Give thanks. I'm glad you mentioned the word, the name Semahj, because Semahj means the unity of the two regions, and that was the official name of the civilization of the Nile. Many people speak of Kemet, but Kemet was just the northeastern section of Semahj. Tarseti, now known as Nubia or Ethiopia, was another region to the south of this great united region. To speak about Set, though, Set at one time in our legacy was had a benevolent aspect to it, because actually Set is unbridled force, and Set represents the challenge to Heru. And without Set, Heru really has no purpose for being, and that is why in the battle between Heru and Set, when Heru had got the better of Set and was about to slay Set, his mother said, "No, bind him," indicating that Set would live to fight another day.
And then she unbind him.
Right. Precisely, she let him go.
She let him
and
go.
And of course, Heru then, in his reflex action, knocked off her crown.
Yeah.
And Tahuti came and put the crown of Het Heru on her head, the disc and the horns. So now, Set did not become malevolent or bad until the Hekshasu, the shepherd kings, came in and they adopted Set as their deity. That is when you find that the Nile Valley Africans really did not like Set, and he became malevolent. It's good to remember that many of the kings took, and of course in the second dynasty, took the name Set. Some even took the name Set Heru. You would see sometimes on the temple walls that Set and the head of Set and Heru was on one body. And in the Pertem Ru, the book of the coming forth, mislabeled the Egyptian book of the dead, they refer to the two fighters within me, which is Heru and Set, our higher nature, Heru, and the lower nature, Set. In the body temple, the higher region and the lower region is divided by the heart center, the heart arit, or gateway, known as a chakra in the Indian system. That Heru was given the region from the heart to the head, and then Set was given the region from the lower part of the heart to the gonads. All right, but then Geb, who was the presiding over the tribunal of the battle between Heru and Set, gave it all to Heru, which means that all of the kings and queens that sat on the Nile Valley Queen Kingdom throne, they took the title Heru, and their job was to restore Ma'at, to take the lower energy and bring it up to the higher regions. Set represents gravity, Heru represents levity. That is why you would see in the glyphs, you would see that Heru is symbolized as a falcon, and Set is an animal always sitting down with a tail that has the shape of a television antenna, rabbit ears, just like that. And I always tell the brothers and sisters, I said, you know, the battle between Heru and Set, Set took out Heru's eye, which is what happens when you're too much into the TV set. You lose your eye. And the Setian culture...
You lose your consciousness.
Precisely, which is your eye.
Yes.
Okay. But it's good to remember, we should remember that Set is not necessarily evil. Set is your challenges. The evil is Apap. Apap, which unfortunately has this name Papa to it. And
it does, doesn't it?
It does. And we're not going to talk about the definition of Papa.
Not on this show.
No, we won't. Yeah.
Okay.
But the fact is that is evil. That's the crystallization of evil. You would see on the temple walls, you would see both Heru and Set on the boat fighting the enemies of Ra, Apap. And they're both putting spears in the folds of Apap.
That's true.
Because Apap is evil crystallized.
Right.
And the individual must sometimes marshal his higher and lower forces to deal against that evil that comes from without.
In fact, it has been said this way, that if we did not have Set in us, that we would not be able to survive.
Precisely.
Because people would just run over us. The Muslims codified it as the inner jihad, and it's the same definition, same connotation as Set. You must fight the evil within inside yourself.
That's right.
You fight your lower nature, to rise to your higher consciousness, which Heru represents,
Indeed, and even the Hu, or the Sphinx, represents the same thing. It shows the head on a lion's body. The lions representing the animal nature, and the head of the man representing higher consciousness. You see, so we definitely need these two forces, but too much Set will keep you set in your ways. You see, Set your bad habits.
Yes.
The habits that will keep you grounded, keep you from rising up. And so we want to be Heru. We want to really levitate and be in the spirit. But you can't live in the spirit all the time. You've got to deal with earth conditions. In the Pertem Ru it says that I arise to the highest heights of heaven, but I come down to the earth of Seb. And indeed, Smai-Tawi, the very name of the nation, indicated that the people who gave it that name saw that you had to wear the crown of heaven and the crown of earth, that you had to deal with the spiritual and the material realm, and indeed the building of our temples was to invite biocosmic energy from outer space onto the earth plane. we see the configuration of the pyramids of Giza being in the same configurations as the 3 stars in the belt of Sa, now called Orion. That our ancestors were very much into what was happening in the planisphere above, because of course there were farmers and gardeners. And when you're a farmer and a gardener, you had better look up at where the stars are. You had better check out the phases of the moon if you want to get the right return on what you plant, you know, in the ground. So people say, oh, that looking at the stars is evil. Well, if that's evil, please never look at your watch. Never look at the sunrise, okay? Because the sun is the clock by which the Most High keeps time for us on earth. And as many people like to disparage sun worship, why is Sunday such a great day of worship? The sun day. Likewise, the Muslim prayers take place at various hours of the day. And how do you measure the hours of the day? Through the movement of the sun. So don't give me that crap about sun worship. Okay, that's a patent lie in order to slander and defame African thought and African culture and bring us nomadic thought as the tabula rasa by which we should define our consciousness and how we look at things spiritual and religious.
Speaking about Semahj Tawi again, and speaking about the invasions of the foreigners who came in and polluted our spirituality, they call him the heretic king. What is your opinion? Talk on the heretic, so-called heretic king, Akhenaten, so-called creator of monotheism, which again I feel is a misnomer because he did not create monotheism. We always believed in one supreme force, one created force. Would you agree with that?
Yes, we call that force Ntara, or the great divine, the great divinity. And just like you have today, don't you have God, and then you have the angels,
and then you have Jesus, the Son of God.
You see, and of course,
the prophets of God.
Precisely. Of course, now in modern religiosity, it's patently patriarchal. There are no female angels in the heavens of any of the major religions. I ask people, I lecture in universities, colleges, I ask the audience, can you give me the name of one female angel? Total silence. I say for every Gabriel, there should be a Gabriella. For every Michael, there be a Michaela. Even Lucifer should have a Lucifera. Because in our cosmology, in African cosmology, everything is balanced. If above, so below, and if it takes feminine and masculine energy to create life on the earth, so it must be in cosmos. All right? Because to us, we saw heaven as the womb of space, as Nut, the divine space mother, and all of the galaxies, all of the stars and suns and comets and planets resided within the womb of space. And the womb, once again, is a feminine principle. So you see, African culture always honored the mother. That's why we place her on the top of creation. Does this make the man weak? He had better be strong to uphold this divine principle of the mother's womb and the children that comes from that womb. I would say that if we were more conscious of that, we wouldn't have the wars that we have now between the women and the men. Because, you see, men see deity as only he. We pray to the man upstairs, never to her. Yet, in our lives, we know that many times the man is gone, and it's mama who keeps things going in our community anyway. So we should likewise have a belief in a deity who is a mother and father of all creation.
Speaking about the womb of life, one of the things that Americans, Europeans, and black people do is they always talk about Mother Earth. In the Kemetic legacy, there was no Mother Earth. It was Geb, Father Earth,
Precisely.
And Nut, who was the mother in the sky.
Mother
Can you
sky.
speak on that for a minute, please?
True. Well, just like in the Chinese they speak of the yin and yang, on earth there is a mother aspect to the earth, and that's the topsoil out of which the plant emerges, you see, from the womb of the earth, from the womb of the soil. However, the bedrock on which this earth rests is masculine. The metals in the earth are all masculine. Ptah, who is the neter of metals, is shown as a masculine deity, all right? But in Ptah, there is concealed the feminine T, because in our legacy, the T is a feminizer, symbolizes the breast. Of course, Egyptologist says it's a loaf of bread, but even so, it's still a nurturing principle to help your life.
Even Kemet ends in the T.
Precisely.
Right, yeah.
Showing again
the feminine aspect. Yes.
And the king wore the double crown that had a cobra and a vulture.
Both female, yes.
Wachit and Nekabet. And that was known as the two ladies' name of the king, because we saw the land as feminine, you know, that we served the mother principle. And the king was also entitled Insut Biti, okay, again the bee, bit, and the plant, the su plant, the soot plant of the south. South comes from Sut or Set, again, the region that Set ruled in his benevolent aspect. Let me tell you, my brother, I can sit here all night and talk about the beauty of this legacy. There's so many aspects to it that for the lay person out there, they may wonder, what in the world is he talking about?
Yes.
But this information has been willfully kept from our people and from all people. It has been kept in a place they call Egyptology in order to deny its Africanity.
In fact, just to expand on what you're saying, when you talk about Egyptology, you have to go to East Asian studies in order to even get Egyptology. You can't get it in Africa.
At the University of Chicago, they have a place called the Oriental Institute. Now, if you don't know any better, you think, well, this is the study of the Chinese and the Japanese lifestyle, because we usually associate the Orient with Japan and China. You know, well, Orient means what? East. You know, relative to where we are in America, all of Africa, Russia, all of those lands are in the Orient. You know?
True.
And this is what they would call the Occident. I think it's more like the accident, Columbus's accident, who didn't discover anything. All he discovered was that he was lost. That's what he discovered. How can you discover? It's like somebody discovering your car parked on 125th Street, you know? Yeah. So, no, there's no such discovery. And that's why I think it's such a tragedy this Columbus Day about the discovery. No, that's the European discovery that the earth was indeed round after the battle Galileo, where he got the knowledge that the earth was round from Kemet. But they never want to give credit to the Africans of the Nile Valley for this knowledge. They always try to make it seem as if it dropped out of space. And then now they're saying that ancient Egypt was built by people from outer space, by aliens, you know. Well, yes, Egypt was created by aliens with an attitude, but Kemet was created by Africans of the Nile. And let's say that the civilization came from Central Equatorial Africa. And that's another thing we have to watch, because when we speak of north, we always think of north as up, you see? And all the map makers are Europeans, so they always have north on top because they want Europe to be on top of everything. But with a round ball moving in space, who say that north must always be on top? You can choose to look at the earth from any perspective. I prefer to look at it not from the north or from the south. I look at it from the eastern perspective where the sun rises. And in the summer solstice, that eastern perspective, it rises right over the equator. And when it passes over the Great Lakes of Africa, which we call the Apet, that's to us the top of the world, and that's where the Nile River has its beginnings in the southern region. And then it flows down the slope of the earth down north. You see, Lake Tana likewise would be up, and it flows down north to the delta. It meets at Khartoum in Sudan and then flows down into the lotus tributaries of the Great Green Sea, which we call the Huat Ur, or the Great Green, now called Mediterranean. So we have to begin to look at even our world from a different perspective, because if you just follow the map makers, they always show it with north being on top.
That happened around 1555. Prior
Precisely.
to that, it was Africa was on top.
Yes.
I mean, you know that Africa must be on top because the Nile does not flow against gravity.
Precisely.
So it's not
Precisely.
flowing up; it's flowing down.
And when, that's why this whole idea of south being up, it confuses people, because we are looking at the earth from a European perspective. And it's understandable. They make the map, so they're going to give themselves the favor, you see. And then you have the tragedy of people in Australia calling themselves down under. Down under where? Please. You're in a round ball, a beautiful space ball, a ship moving around in space. And I must say to my brothers and sisters in all the religions, we are already in heaven. Where you want to go up and freeze? We're already in heavens.
You know what Dr. Ben says about heaven, don't you?
Yes, he says he places heaven in a particular part of our women's anatomy, but I would say that heaven is our women, period. All of her. I just don't subscribe to applying it just to one part of her. She's totally
But no,
heaven.
I mean, the legacy says that the woman is the heaven because Newt is the heaven.
Precisely.
So the woman is the heaven.
Yes, and we love to go to heaven, don't
Right,
we?
I need to stay in heaven.
So you see, sisters, you have a part to play in this thing. Don't give it all up to the man upstairs. You have a very important part, because in our legacy, what has happened is that people who tend to live an inverted lifestyle, they brought the woman down from heaven and put the man upstairs, and that's the reason why now he's grown wings and flapping around with a problem with his wrist. But you see, we have to make those corrections.
While we're talking about the women, let's expand upon that, would you please, because there are many deities, there are many energy forces that are nectaru, that are represented by female.
Precisely.
And our women need to know that. Our women need to know first that the first temple of love ever built for a woman was built by an Osut, a pharaoh, for his favorite queen. That's called Abu Simbel, the double temple of
Precisely.
Abu Simbel. You know?
that Ramesses II built for his beautiful
I
wife,
didn't want to use the word
Nefertari.
Ramesses.
Ramesu.
Okay, you know.
Yeah.
All right, so but let's go into some of the deities, some of the energy forces that are represented as female forces.
Well, the first and most important one is Ma'at. Ma'at was known as the Lady of Truth, and she represents the divine order and balance that exists in all of nature. And she's shown as a woman with a feather of an ostrich feather in her headband, all right? And the kings and queens of the Nile Valley nation of Semahj, they always refer to themselves as Nib, which means Lord, or Nbet,
or master.
or or Nbet, Lady of Truth, righteousness and order. And I would like to say that our governmental system was a ma'aticracy. It means a governance of righteousness, governance of order, a governance of law. So we like to think that foreigners brought us the idea of law and morality. No, we had it long before. And Moses got at least 8 of the 10 commandments from the 42 oracles or laws of Ma'at, which was the basic moral system that guided the African life. And I tell couples today, I said that you must enthrone Ma'at in your home, because the man doesn't rule, nor does the woman rule. Ma'at rules, and both of you serve the higher principle of balance in your lives. And if you do that, if you realize that you, woman, you sit on your throne as the queen, the man sits on his throne as king in your household, both of you are servants of Ma'at, then your children would see what the order is and give respects to both hemispheres. Because today there's too much misogyny, too much refusal to see the power of the woman and to give her the proper respect that she deserves. Too much abuse of our women. And too many of our women, unfortunately, play into that and allow it to happen. So
we got 10 minutes, and I need Oh, okay, so I need you to go into Sekhmet. I need you to go in Aset and Nehuvet.
Sekhmet, vital force, Ast and Nebuchadnezzar, the two sisters. Now this is very important and so empowering for our women to know that these two women, Ast and Nebuchadnezzar, who they call Isis and Nephthys, were the ones who put the body of the broken and the first crucified Savior in our story, or his story for that matter. They put his body together again. Now, in the story as we see it in the Bible with Yeshua, with Jesus, when Mary and Martha got there, the stone had already been rolled away. Yeshua, Jesus, had already ascended. So they had nothing to do with his resurrection. But in the African story, the woman not only made his resurrection possible, but they made his ascension possible. And not only that, they were responsible for fashioning the organ of regeneration that had been swallowed by the fish, and uttering hekau, words of spiritual effective action that caused his organ to rise. And Ast transformed herself into a female falcon and took the seed of Asar into her spiritual union. They refer to it as immaculate conception nowadays because the people who use that term see sex as dirty. Mm-hmm. Well, it's dirty if that's how you think about it. Mm-hmm. And if you think about the woman as dirty, and that's another problem that male oriented religiosity has. And that's the reason why they always put down the woman. But in our culture that is forbidden, because the mother must be given her proper respect. So therefore, you had Meshkanet, who was the woman, the principle of the birth chamber. Meshkanet is the power that allows you to rebirth yourself. Renanet, the one who gives you your name. Your name is tied up with your fortune. That's why we must choose names that have meaning and significance. And we must stop creating these names out of the sky. You know, like I don't even want to use the names that we choose nowadays. So these feminine principles, like Mut, the origin of the word mother. Mut is shown, and some people, why did you use a vulture to symbolize the mother? Well, without the vulture, the desert would be an ecological disaster. Mm-hmm. And that vulture, to show how it nurtures its young, in the drought season, that vulture would prick its own thigh and allow its baby vulture to drink its blood in order to spare the baby's life. So the vulture is not a terrible animal. The Most High made all things. All right. You would have likewise. We spoke of Nut, the mm-hmm, divine mm-hmm. mother. Mm-hmm.
And Het Heru. Let's talk about
Het Heru. Oh, Het Heru. The Yoruba refer to her as Oshun. Mm-hmm. Het Heru was known to us as the divine principle of nurturing, of sensuality, of sexuality, of joy, of merriment, of festival. This is the zone of Het Heru, of beauty, all right? And we do have Kaisa Het Heru, who is the keeper of the oldest shrine dedicated to Het Heru here in North America. And she likewise is at the studio of Ptah down in Manhattan, and she does fantastic work with. She weaves Kemetic cloth, mm-hmm. okay, and she also does clay work of what we call she pots, you know, honoring the woman.
Hold it for the next time.
Yes, thank you.